Pocket network attacks for exfiltration with the Bash Bunny, this time on Hak5. So exfiltration, it's something that we've gotten really good at doing over the years, and it's a fun word for basically an involuntary backup because it's important to back up your files. And so it's something that we've been doing from the days of the USB switchblade on through the USB rubber ducky, and the techniques that we've used have been so good that they've been featured by the likes of the USA show Mr. Robot. And in that instance, in fact, the technique was shown that would copy documents from, say, an FBI laptop over back to the USB rubber ducky by mass storage. And so because that's become so popular, we're actually noticing, penetration testers are reporting that, sometimes organizations are actually privy to this kind of attack and will prevent copying of files over to like USB mass storage. I mean, this is literally the way that Edward Snowden walked out of the NSA with tons of documents. So that brings up different ways to exfiltrate documents, right? So, hello, all, kitty. So if you're going to exfiltrate documents, seriously, I just walked into Catland. So if you're going to exfiltrate documents not to USB mass storage, then another fantastic way would be over to a network. And you could do that a number of ways. Basically, most operating systems are going to have an FTP client. So transferring over FTP, pretty good. Only problem there is that you're very likely to get noticed by a network administrator that's looking for that kind of obvious, hey, I'm taking your documents over FTP. And unfortunately, you can't use some of the other the other protocols that are built into, say, for instance, Windows, like SMB/CIFS, whatever you want to call it, basically the Windows file sharing system, because that protocol does not work over the internet. And it's not like we've got the time to spin up a VPN or anything of that nature. I don't want to mess up these guys' game, but they look like they're having a lot of fun. So we're going to have a lot of fun by exfiltrating documents over a common protocol to Windows, SMB, even though it doesn't work over the internet. In fact, we're going to do it locally because we can do it all on the Bash Bunny. Yeah, that's right. We can do it with a pocket network so that there's no logs whatsoever of the files leaving the network, and yet it's still going to have the speed and the transparency of having used the network. I love this attack, and we can do this because of SMB. Well, the nice thing about the Bash Bunny is that it, in fact, is a full Linux computer. So it's got the ability to run an SMB server using Samba, the open source equivalent. And this is the coolest thing because when we plug the Bash Bunny into a computer and it emulates RNDIS Ethernet, for example, that computer then becomes an actual client of the Bash Bunny's network. And once that happens, then, well, all sorts of fun. So get this, I'll just give you a quick demonstration of exactly what I'm talking about. So I'll go ahead and pull up PuTTY. I have my Bash Bunny plugged into my computer in RNDIS mode, and I'll just go ahead and SSH into it. And if I head over to /pentest, I've got this awesome set of tools here called Impacket. And Impacket comes with all of these different examples. And one of the examples that I'm really keen on using right now is an SMB server. So get this, /SMB server, and I'll get a couple of different options to use. So basically all I need to do is give it the name of the share and a directory on the Bash Bunny, and then suddenly it will show up on the Windows computer as if it's just any other network that I can access that nobody is blocking, because why would they? So get this, if I just do /SMB server and say, okay, comment is hello, whatever, and then we'll call it TMP for fun, and let's just do it to /, like the very root of the file system on the Bash Bunny, and I'll go ahead and execute that. And now, from my Windows computer, I'm gonna go ahead and just do // 172.16.64.1, which is the IP address of the Bash Bunny. Booyah. And you see I've logged in, and now, aha, get that. I can see the entire root file system of my Bash Bunny. It's that simple. So you can see where we're going with this. In fact, I've already written a payload to do just this. So let's take a look at that. I'm gonna go ahead and cancel out of this and just set my Bash Bunny over to arming mode, plug that guy in, and we'll go through this payload. All right, so under payloads, I've got in switch 1. Let's take a look at payload.txt. I'm titling this the SMB Exfiltrator because it sounds cool. We're gonna liberate some files off this computer. So basically, it's going to rely on PowerShell. So Windows XP Service Pack 3 or above, and the rest of it is pretty straightforward. And then we've got some options to set here, which is pretty cool. But essentially what we're doing is we're deciding, okay, what are the types of files that we want to liberate? In this case, all the PDF files. And then we've got some different options here that we can get into. But really the magic is this awesome line of PowerShell. So the very first stage of this payload is a HID stage. And so what that means is we're going to go ahead and inject keystrokes into the computer. And then after that, once we're done injecting keystrokes, we're going to switch over to a different attack mode. And so we can have multiple stages in our attack, and it can be conditional based on different variables. So for instance, this part right here is going to say, hey, go into attack mode HID. So it'll accept ducky script here and type just like a keyboard. And we can go ahead and say GUI R, which I know will pull that up. And then we're going to enter in this string. So it's going to type everything that's in these quotes right here. So let me break this out so we can actually check it out and see what it's doing. I'm going to fire up another copy of Notepad++ just to make this easy, and kind of make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. So the very first thing that we're doing here is we're opening up PowerShell. So let's just go ahead and walk through this. I'll open up PowerShell. And in this case, it's using -window style minimize. So basically what that means is when this payload runs, basically PowerShell is going to be hidden in the very bottom. So unless you're really looking for an icon in the taskbar, you're probably not going to notice it. And it's just going to sit there waiting for what it's being told to be done. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and do a little loopy loop. So what that means is we're doing a while true. Okay, so I'm going to clean this up and actually make it look like PowerShell, because there's a couple of things here to keep in mind. Like for instance, this backslash here is an escape character, and so what that's doing is it's escaping that quotation mark. Because we're using the power of bash here, we have to keep in mind that different characters are going to be actually executed just like you would a bash script. So in this case, I'm saying, while true, do this. So I'm doing an if statement in PowerShell, mind you, and this awesome command here is this test connection. So is testing a connection to an IP address, and then we're telling it to do it once and to do it quietly. Well, let's go ahead and just run this test connection thing so you can see what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that into my PowerShell. And you'll see it goes ahead and fails. Why does it fail? Well, because I have the Bash Bunny in arming mode, so it's not showing up as a network anymore. It's just showing up as a regular thumb drive and a serial device. So let me go ahead and switch the Bash Bunny over back into that RNDIS Ethernet mode and then run this command again. So this is awesome. I love that everybody in Indonesia is like, you know, so polite, and everybody wishes me, you know, well wishes. I'm back out of the hospital, and you know, even got myself a little have a mice day with a heart and an arrow and a bunch more hearts, and that's just the coolest thing. Everybody here is very sweet. I'm imagining that that's the international language of glad you're feeling better, keep on hacking. All right, so it's in Ethernet mode. Let's take a look. So if I run that command again now, hey, look at this, Notepad++. By the way, this is why you should not be editing your payloads on your Bash Bunny. You should be editing them locally, because you will lose awesome work if you totally mess up this way. So don't do what I'm doing, do what I'm saying. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, keep the filing editor. Yeah. I'm going to copy all of that. I'm going to open up a new Notepad++, and I'm going to save this. Okay. So now that the Bash Bunny is connected to this computer, I'm going to go ahead and run this again. And it's quite simply test connection, the IP address. Okay, so we actually see the source, we see the destination, we see it's 32 bytes. Basically, this is like a ping test, but a little bit more robust, and it's built into PowerShell, which makes it really easy to use with these conditional statements, because what I'm trying to do here is I'm setting up a stage that is saying, hey, loop, while true, means keep looping and do this forever. And then we do this if statement that says, hey, keep doing this, which is to say, check for the IP address of the bash bunny. And then when you actually find the bash bunny, then we're going to have some other stuff to do. But until then, just keep waiting around, minimized in the task tray until the bash bunny switches over into its Ethernet mode. So I can see I've got my results there. So that would be true. So what's the rest of this? Well, okay, so we're going to say, and I'm just going to pretty this up. I'm going to use tabs because I'm being lazy, or because I love Python. I'm not sure which one is which. And we're going to say, after that, we're going to say sleep for 2 seconds. We'll get into why. Then do this net use. I'll get back to that in a sec. Then we'll do a robocopy, and then we'll exit. And then, so we're finished with that statement, and then we're finished with that statement. Okay, cool. So it's a very simple while loop, except it's a little one-liner that fits inside of your Windows run line, which makes it a very fast payload to run. So it's doing this test connection, and it's doing it quietly, and it's doing it, one ping at a time, if you could say. And once this is true, then it's going to run the rest of the stuff inside of here. And until that happens, it's just going to keep waiting around, which is awesome. So once it is true, it just waits a moment, which gives the SMB server a chance to be receiving those files. We'll get into optimization of this a little later. Then we do this net use. So this is actually an old command, and the reason for it is because we're going to be using, I think originally I was using a PowerShell copy command. Right now I'm using robocopy, but either way, we need to cache the credentials of this SMB server. Now this SMB server is set up to take any credentials whatsoever. So what I'm doing here is I'm caching the credentials for guest. Very simple login. And that just means that when we go to actually exfiltrate the documents off our target, we're going to be doing it over that user account. So that's what that next part is. So once we've cached these credentials, I can use robocopy. Fantastic. It's a robust file copy tool for Windows. It's been around for forever. And what we're going to say is, what files are we copying? Well, in this case, we're beginning with $env. Now notice this $sign right here has a backslash in front of it, similar to how this net use has 3 backslashes. Now remember, we went previously to // that IP address. We didn't go to 3 backslashes, so what's up with that? Well, again, because this is the bash bunny interpreting our ducky script to do the keystroke injection attack, we've got the full power of bash, but it also means that we have to be mindful of escaping these special characters. So in this case, I actually want to use the $sign as opposed to expanding out a potential variable that I can actually use in bash. So in this case, that backslash in front of the $sign is actually saying, hey, actually type a $sign. So in this case, when I type $env user profile like I do right here, what does that actually mean? Well, let's go ahead and back to our PowerShell and take a look. If I echo that env user profile, it says, hey, /users/Darren. It's the user profile. It's very similar to user profile in DOS, but I'm trying to move away from DOS or CMD, if you will, because Microsoft is phasing it out. But if you wanted to, you could do echo %user profile %, and you would get the same thing. Okay, so what I'm doing then is I'm copying, in this case, /users/dk /documents, which is my documents folder, and then I'm sending the contents to, in this case, again, triple / because we're escaping that /, allowing us to say, typing in // the IP address of the bash bunny /e. Why E? Well, our payload is going to be set up to use as few characters as possible to make this as fast as possible. Actually, this is not optimized at all. This is very much a proof of concept payload. It works wonderfully right now, but it can be made much faster. But anyway, that's why 1 character. Because the Windows Run dialog, this one right here, only allows you to type in 260 characters. So a little more than a tweet is all you're going to get into that run line before it just truncates. So for a very complex payload, we're going to want to use as many aliases and other tricks in our PowerShell to get it down to as little as possible. All right, I haven't done that yet, but this will work. Okay, so we're doing a robocopy of all of those from the documents over to the Bash Bunny, and then we're actually saying, in this case, the exfiltrate files. Remember that exfiltrate files? Let's take a look. It was at the very top of this payload, and these are the options, where we're going to save our loot, and what files we want to exfiltrate, and if we want to clear our tracks. So the idea with these Bash Bunny payloads is that very simply you can just alter the variables at the top of the script, and then you don't have to get into the weeds of all of the different, how it works and whatnot if you don't want to, which is really cool. So in this case, what I'm saying is, what types of documents do you want to grab? Are you looking for docx files or xlsx files or PowerPoint? I don't know what you want. I'm just going to go with PDFs because they're always fun. There's always good stuff in PDFs. So in this case, that's going to go ahead and exfiltrate our files. But notice that there wasn't a backslash in front of this $sign like there was in front of this $sign. The reason for that is that we're actually going to expand that out. So when this types into the computer, it's not going to type robocopy env user profile /documents to / 172.16.64.1 / e $ exfiltrate files. No, this right here, this $ exfiltrate files is going to get replaced by star.pdf, which is really cool. We didn't have the power of that with the USB wrapper ducky before, now we do. The last part is to do a /s, which says, hey, give me everything in all the subdirectories. So not just whatever the root of the My Documents folder is. And then the last thing is to exit, and that's important because we're in a loop. So if we don't exit this, it's gonna keep copying those same files over and over. All right, cool. So that's kind of the breakdown on that little bit of PowerShell, and that's basically just gonna copy everything over to wherever we've specified when we spin up our SMB server with Impacket. All right, let's continue through this payload. So that's what this first stage here does. The next thing is we have a conditional statement. This is, again, the really cool part about Bash is we can actually decide if the user wants us to do things or if based on certain conditions, we want to execute different parts of our payload. So this one is just kind of an example one, but it's a fun one, which is, do we want to clear our tracks? And we've covered this before. There's a little bit of awesome PowerShell, which will delete a registry key, which contains the history, if you will, of the Windows run dialog, which is where we love to inject some code. So if we take a look here, I can hit this down arrow and I'll see like, yeah, I've got a lot of stuff in here because I've been doing a lot of testing, right? Well, if I want, if I specify this clear tracks as yes, and I can make this, a little bit more robust, if you will, but let's just go with this for right now. Then it's going to go ahead and execute everything inside this if statement. So we've got our if, and then we end it with fi, and real simple logic, which just says, hey, if when you're configuring this payload, you say yes right there, then it's going to go ahead after it initializes this. After it does our first stage, it's going to go ahead and clean up the tracks, which means that if you're the incident response guy, it's not going to be as obvious that there was like a bunch of PowerShell injected into the run line. Basically, it does very similarly to the other one. It runs PowerShell with the window being minimized, and it just does a remove item property, and then it specifies the path to this particular place in the Windows registry, and then if there's an error, it just silently continues. So that gets rid of everything. Cool. Okay, next part is the Ethernet stage. So what's happening here is I'm going to go ahead and change my LED. So in this first part of the payload in our HID stage, the LED was red and green, which makes yellow its additive color, it's RGB. And the reason for that is because I want to know, just based on glancing at my Bash Bunny, where I am in my payload. So stage 1, stage 2, different colors make sense. In fact, I've got a couple other different colors based on, initialization, for instance. We're going to actually do red and green, but we're going to blink at 100 milliseconds. Similarly, at the very top, we actually have a little check. This is just saying, hey, if this directory doesn't exist, hence there being an exclamation point here, this would say if the directory does exist. By having a bang there, it says if it doesn't, then all I'm gonna do is blink the LED red at 100 milliseconds, which is a pretty quick blink, and then I'm gonna exit 1. By doing that exit 1, it exits with a, saying that basically it wasn't successful. And then I'll just be able to glance at my, Bash Bunny and know like, hey, the red light is blinking fast, which means in this case, the dependency isn't met because you need to have InPacket installed in /pentest. It's that simple. So back to our Ethernet stage. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and set up the attack by getting our in this case, red and blue, which makes purple because purple is awesome. Blink that at 100 milliseconds pretty quickly, switch over to RNDIS mode. So now the Bash Bunny on that computer is no longer a keyboard. The Google Home is talking to me. So it's no longer a keyboard, it's now an Ethernet device. And so the rest of this is a little bit of setup. So first thing we're gonna do is make a temporary loot directory. The reason for that is we're going to be exfiltrating the documents off of this computer onto the actual local memory of the Linux box that is the Bash Bunny. Once we've actually obtained all of that loot, then we're going to move it over to the USB disk partition for convenience so we can easily access that stuff just over the arming mode. So we've got this temporary place in root, loot, SMB Exfiltrator, temp. And then we'll just, remove anything that's potentially in there from last time in case the payload failed. And then we're going to fire up our SMB server. So just like before, that SMB server, and the only big difference here, other than that place I put that thing that time, is that we're going to go ahead and put an ampersand at the end of this. The reason for that is that ampersand is going to run this command in the background, which means that our payload will continue running. Since this is just Bash and it's kind of like procedural, if I didn't put that ampersand there, the payload would stop running right here because it would just be like, all right, I did what you told me to do. I'm running InPacket's SMB server. And it won't do anything until that finishes. So by running this in the background, we can continue on with the payload, knowing that that service is up and running. The rest of the stuff here is to source bunny helpers. So that's specific to this version of the firmware. This may get automated sometime down the line, but essentially it's a set of additional functions which help us do all sorts of cool things. And we're gonna get more into that later, but essentially it's gonna say, hey, in this case, it's allowing us to get certain environment variables that are important for this next bit, which is to make our loot directory. Again, this is all probably going to get cleaned up over time and made even easier, but this snippet of code I've been using in the last few payloads, which essentially just makes a directory in the USB disk partition on the Bash Bunny called whatever the name of the computer is and then an incrementing number. The reason for that is we may exfiltrate files off of the same machine multiple times. So my machine, in this case, in fact, I'll pull up the command prompt, I'll echo host name. No, I'll echo, what is it, computer name. And my computer's name is desktop HQ4RNPR, whatever the Microsoft Surface was called when it's set up. I didn't bother to change it. Yours might be something really cool. Whatever it may be, it should be unique to you-ish on the network, and then we can know, hey, this is that computer that we exfiltrated documents for, and this is the umpteenth time that we did it, because we may plug it in multiple times. All right, so that's what that's for, and that will probably turn into a function later. Next thing is a little error checking. We just, very similar to how we checked to see whether or not the dependencies were installed, this very simple if statement with this tac-z is going to make sure that this, this environment variable here, which we got by sourcing bunny helpers, this environment variable here, which is, we've got target host name, we also have target IP. These are variables that we get by sourcing bunny helpers, which allows us to know the IP address that the victim received from the Bash Bunny. So what we're doing right here is we're checking to make sure that that variable has something in it, because if it doesn't, then we know that something went wrong and the victim computer did not receive an IP address from the Bash Bunny, in which case we don't want to continue, okay? So in this case, very similar to the other, I'm just going to go ahead and blink the red LED and exit 1. And instead of blinking at 100 milliseconds, I'm going to blink at a rate of 1 second. Reason is I can now look at my Bash Bunny, and based on the speed that the red LED is blinking, I can know, hey, did it fail because dependencies weren't met, or did it fail because it didn't get an IP address from the computer? So There we go. Then there's this bit of convoluted code, which I definitely need to clean up, but I think is really cool because it has potential. All right, so basically at this point, right, we're imagining from the perspective of that victim computer, we injected a bit of PowerShell into the run line as a keyboard very quickly, and it's running in the background minimized, and all it's doing is it's waiting for the bash bunny to be available. It's pinging, if you will, that IP address of the bash bunny, and once it can find the bash bunny, it's going to wait for 2 seconds. I know, and then it's going to start that file copy. Great. So as soon as it's able to see the bash bunny, which is, let's see, so we fire up inpacket right after we set over to RNDIS, hence the 2 seconds. Once it can see that, it's going to go ahead and start copying those files, but how do we know when it's done, right? This is the really fun part about having all of that power. We've got that logic behind it. We can actually say, like, okay, it's not up to the computer to tell us when it's done, although we could easily just take a look at the computer, because as soon as it finishes what we told it to do, which is copy all the files, that minimized PowerShell icon will disappear from the taskbar, right? So we could know that it's done copying files that way, but we still have to process those files. We still have to move them from one directory to another on the bash bunny. So how do we know? Well, in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to loop around, basically doing a find command on where we're temporarily storing that loot. And we're going to take a look at the file sizes, and we're going to continuously compare them over time to see if they are increasing. And when they stop increasing, we're going to say, okay, well, we've obviously finished copying files, because over the last whatever so many seconds, the timestamps or the size of the files has not changed. So that's what this does. Basically, we're saying, well, the last time we checked doesn't equal the current, right? So what we'll do is we'll run this command here. So we're actually specifying a variable. This variable current is going to equal the output of this command, hence there being $ open parentheses. You may see this in old bash scripts using a grav or a backtick like this. It's not the right way to do it. It's supposed to look like that. It will work, but don't do that. It's bad. Okay, so what we're doing is we're saying find in this directory, and we're going to specify all this good stuff, and then we're going to sort it and tail it and take a look at the last result. And I could walk you through this entire command, but essentially what it's going to do is give you the Unix epoch time code of the last time that the file was modified, right? So in seconds since some arbitrary date in 1960, correct me if I'm wrong. And it's going to go ahead and sort those, and it's going to choose the most recent file. And so what will happen is that will become, so the very first thing is we say the last time we ran it is whatever the current time is, which when we very first run it, it's 0 and 1. Now, the next time we run it, this find command will become the current. So when it loops around again, it's going to say, okay, cool, so whatever, say it was like 5 seconds since Unix epoch, and then we wait and we loop over again, and we update current, and now it's been, I don't know, say we waited 9 seconds. So now we're at a total of 14 seconds, and 14 is obviously not equal to 4, or 5, and so now we continue waiting. So what's in the rest of this is basically, I'm going to change the LED to blue, and then I'm sleeping for 1 second, and then I'm going to go back to this purple blinking, and then sleep for 9 seconds. Okay, it'll work. It's not as graceful as I want it to be, but we can always solve it later. It does work, and that's what's important. And I feel like by having that, so that interstitial, if you will, of the LED going from that purple blinking to just a solid blue for a second, gives you that reassurance that, oh, files are being copied. I'll just hang around. All right, so once that is done, well, now we need to process those files. So what we'll do here is I'm going to set the LED to RGB. Very obvious. When you add red, green, and blue in terms of RGB, you get white. Very obvious that our payload has finished receiving files now, and I'm going to go ahead and just move the files from that temporary location over to that place that we had set up previously, which is specific to this exfiltration encounter, which is in our loot directory, / the name of the computer, -- the time that we've done this, And then we'll do a little syncy sync to make sure that the file system is good. And then trap is clean, so set the LED to green. That's it. All right, so the last bit now is to do a quick little demo. So I'm just gonna switch my payload over to switch 1 and plug in my Bash Bunny, and let's watch. Quick little run line action. I've set it to yes, so it gets rid of all of that good stuff. So actually now, while it's doing that, I'll show you. I hit Windows key R and haha, there we go. And actually you'll see it's down here minimized, but if I take a look, nothing listed in there. So it's pretty silent as far as the user interaction. It's kind of like this little 1-2 punch there, if you will. And I have a feeling like if some of the PowerShell were reduced, there'd be a way to get this all into one line in both setting up the exfiltration single stage at the beginning, as well as getting in that kind of, remove the H key, local machine, whatever it is, the registry thing to clear the tracks. I'd love to see that into one line. Either way, it's blinking purple, which tells me, hey, oh no, it just went solid white, which means it's now copying files, it's solid green, so I'm ready to just unplug this. I mean, this did not take long. Now I can flip the switch back into the forward arming mode and plug it back into the computer. And now it's just gonna show up like regular mass storage, and then I'll be able to go ahead and see what kind of loot I got. All right. There we go. I've got a loot folder, SMB Exfiltrator, and you can see I've run this on this test computer a bunch of different times in development. But the latest version, number 12, and hey, there we go. I got that W9, and what else do I have? I have all of these different PDF documents, faxes and stuff. Oh, shouldn't open that on camera. Anyway, all sorts of good stuff, and this is very exciting because now like anyone can use this payload. And the last bit is, of course, to go ahead and submit it. So that's very similar to what we've talked about in the past. I've gone ahead and created a folder called SMB Exfiltrator for this. I have both my payload txt, which looks pretty good, as well as I created a README MD, very similar to all the others, where I've got a nice little status thing, showing what the different LED colors mean. And I'm just going to go ahead and very simply, you can see I'm in my own fork of the Bash Bunny payloads. So it's forked from Hak5/Bash Bunny payloads into Hak5 Darren. And I'm actually looking at the USB Exfiltrator payload right here, which is where some of this code came from, recycling some good bits. I'm going to go back to the library, and you can see there's a bunch in here already. And I'm going to go ahead and send this over. So all I have to do is drag SMB Exfiltrator into my own fork of the repository. I'm going to go ahead and say, add SMB Exfiltrator payload. This is an awesome payload. Check out Hak5 episode 2202. And then commit changes. Great, now it's up on my repo. Let's get it on the Hak5 repo. I'll go back over to the main repository, and I'll do a new pull request. And I'm going to compare against the forks, and I'm going to choose my own fork. And it sees that, hey, we can actually merge these, and there's my comments, and I just click Create Pull Request. And now, myself or Sebastian or any of the other contributors to this are going to see it and say, hey, awesome payload, and there we go.
If you have a great idea, bring it to the web the way Shannon and I do and head over to domain.com. With an awesome domain discovery service and a quick and easy checkout process, you'll have the perfect site up and running in no time. And the guys over at domain.com are huge Hak5 fans, which is why HAK5 will save you an extra 20% at domain.com. Or just send them a tweet and say thanks for supporting Hak5 all these years. So, when you think domain names, think domain.com.
So as you might imagine, I'm really excited about this technique because I've never encountered a Windows machine that has SMB lockdown, because it's an essential part of being a part of a network. And I think that it's also a really awesome way to demonstrate kind of the power of the community, in that the way that we're doing the Bash Bunny and hosting everything with Git means that here I am putting up this payload, and I know that all of these other developers are going to say, hey, cool, Darren, and I see the inherent problems in your loop with your sleep statements, and here's a better way to do that. And then those will create better functions and better payloads for the entire community. So I'm so excited to see what kind of continued development that we see in this, as I just like brainstorm these awesome ways to, you know, these techniques for exfiltration, and we'll see where it goes. But I mean, how cool is that? Anyway, I'm really excited to see what kind of code we get, and I'm really excited to see your feedback. So as always, feedback@hak5.org is the best place to get a hold of us directly. Also in the comments below, if you're interested in a Bash Bunny of your own, bashbunny.com, or you can just find all the awesome tools that we do over at hakshop.com. Shannon will be back next week with some more awesome stuff. I'm going to continue hacking across the planet. I'm going to be here in Indonesia for a while, and around Southeast Asia. We'll see. Thank you, Blue Ant. And yeah, with all of that, I'm Darren Kitchen. Trust your Technolist. Yeah, no, that's my next Uber ride. Nah, no, it's not. You wouldn't believe how difficult something as simple as crossing the street can be here. Well, there was a button for the crosswalk. Now you sort of just take your chances. It has seriously taken an exorbitant amount of time to cross the street here. I think I'm the only pedestrian in Jakarta. But I made it to a fantastic park, I think.